Imagine you're walking through the streets of modern Britain, surrounded by its iconic architecture, diverse culture, and vibrant history. Now, picture this. Beneath the surface of every interaction, every word spoken, and even the very land you stand on, there's a story. One written not just in books, but in your DNA. Yes, your genes carry the legacy of migrations, invasions, and transformations that occurred over millennia. And one of the most significant threads in this genetic tapestry is the influence of the Saxons, a Germanic tribe whose arrival in Britain over 1,500 years ago shaped not only its culture and history, but also its people. Think about it. What if your DNA could act as a time machine, connecting you directly to the lives of ancient Saxons? What secrets would it reveal about who they were and how they transformed Britain into the country we know today? This video will take you on an extraordinary journey to uncover the hidden story of Saxon DNA. We'll explore the origins of the Saxons, their migration to Britain, and how their genetic and cultural legacy continues to shape modern Britain. From ancient burial sites to groundbreaking scientific studies, we'll connect the dots between past and present in ways you've never imagined. By the end, you'll see how the Saxons left a permanent mark on Britain, not just in its language, traditions, or governance, but in the very essence of its people. So, buckle up as we dive deep into the world of Saxon DNA and uncover its profound influence on British history. To understand the influence of Saxon DNA, we first need to know, who were the Saxons? The Saxons were one of the major Germanic tribes that originated in what is now northern Germany and Denmark. Unlike the unified nation-states of today, the Saxons of the early medieval period were not a centralized group, but a collection of loosely connected tribes. They shared a common language, culture, and way of life, but their power was rooted in local leadership and kinship ties. Their migration to Britain began in the 5th century, a time of massive upheaval in Europe. The Roman Empire, which had ruled Britain for nearly 4 centuries, was crumbling under pressure from invading forces and internal instability. With the Romans gone, Britain became a land of opportunity and conflict. The Saxons, along with other Germanic tribes like the Angles and Jutes, seized the chance to cross the North Sea. But this migration wasn't just a single event. It was a series of waves over decades, each group bringing more people, more resources, and more influence to the British Isles. Why did they come? Historical accounts suggest a combination of factors. The fertile lands of Britain were an obvious attraction for people seeking new opportunities. But there was also a push factor. Overpopulation, scarcity of resources, and political conflicts in their homelands drove the Saxons to seek a better life elsewhere. When the Saxons arrived, they encountered the native Celtic tribes, who had their own rich culture and long-standing traditions. These initial interactions were far from peaceful. The Saxons were warriors, and their arrival often led to violent clashes as they sought to claim territory. However, this wasn't the whole story. Over time, the Saxons didn't just fight, they settled, traded, and even intermarried with the local populations. As the Saxons gained a foothold in Britain, they began establishing their own territories. By the 7th century, these had evolved into powerful kingdoms such as Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria. These kingdoms were not only centers of political power, but also hubs of cultural and social development. The Saxons brought with them their own traditions, including a strong emphasis on local governance, which laid the groundwork for systems that would shape English society for centuries. But their influence wasn't confined to the land or the battlefield. The Saxons also left a lasting imprint on the language. Old English, the ancestor of modern English, has its roots in the dialects spoken by the Saxons and other Germanic tribes. Words, grammar, and even the rhythm of the language carry traces of their influence. To this day, the Saxon migration is remembered as a pivotal moment in British history. But it's not just their cultural contributions that matter. It's the genetic legacy they left behind. In the next section, we'll explore how scientists have traced Saxon DNA in modern Britons and what it reveals about their impact on Britain's population. The Saxons left their mark on Britain not just through culture and conquest, but in the very DNA of its people. In recent decades, groundbreaking scientific advancements have allowed researchers to unlock the secrets of this ancient genetic legacy. giving us a clearer picture of just how deeply Saxon ancestry runs through modern Britain. Let's start with the basics. How do scientists identify Saxon DNA? It begins with ancient burial sites. Across Britain, archaeologists have uncovered skeletal remains dating back to the 5th and 6th centuries, the height of the Saxon migration. Using cutting-edge techniques, scientists extract DNA from these remains, analyzing it for unique genetic markers associated with northern Germany and Denmark, the Saxon homeland. A landmark study published in Nature analyzed the DNA of over 400 ancient individuals from sites across Europe, including key Saxon burial grounds in England. The results were astonishing. In some regions of modern England, particularly in the south and east, up to 40% of the genetic makeup could be traced directly to the Saxons. This means nearly half of the DNA in these areas originates from the waves of Saxon settlers who arrived over a millennium ago. But the influence of Saxon DNA isn't evenly spread. Regions like East Anglia, Kent, and the Midlands, areas historically known for dense Saxon settlement, show the highest concentrations. Meanwhile, parts of Wales, Scotland, and Cornwall retain stronger genetic ties to their Celtic ancestors, reflecting the complex tapestry of Britain's population. Saxon DNA is more than just a trace of ancient ancestry. It's a cornerstone of British identity. The Saxons didn't just settle in Britain. They became a part of its very fabric, shaping how the nation sees itself. Even tone of the most fascinating aspects of this research is how it separates Saxon DNA from that of other groups, like the Vikings and Normans. While the Vikings brought their own distinct genetic influence during later invasions, Saxon DNA carries markers specifically tied to northern Germany. This has allowed scientists to map out the movements and settlements of the Saxons with incredible precision, distinguishing them from other contributors to Britain's genetic history. Modern technology has even allowed for the creation of detailed genetic maps, showing where Saxon DNA is most prevalent in the UK today. These maps reveal a story of migration, integration, and survival, one that mirrors the history books but adds a deeper, biological perspective. What's even more remarkable is how this genetic story aligns with historical records. For example, the concentration of Saxon DNA in East Anglia correlates with accounts of large Saxon settlements in the area. Similarly, regions with lower Saxon influence, such as the far north of Scotland, match historical patterns of resistance to Saxon expansion. But it's not just about ancient DNA. Modern Britons carry this legacy in their own genes. Personal ancestry testing has surged in popularity, with thousands of people discovering their Saxon roots. These tests reveal not only where your ancestors came from but also how their migration helped shape the country you call home. This connection between ancient and modern isn't just a scientific curiosity. It's a reminder of the shared history embedded in each of us. Every strand of Saxon DNA tells a story of migration, resilience, and adaptation. It's a living record of a people who didn't just arrive in Britain, but became an integral part of its identity. The study of Saxon DNA shows us that history isn't something that exists solely in the past. It's alive in our very biology, connecting us to a migration that changed Britain forever. Saxon DNA isn't just a relic of the past. It's the foundation of many cultural and social elements that define Britain today. When the Saxons migrated to Britain, they didn't just bring their genetic heritage. They introduced new ways of life, shaping the land, its people, and their traditions in ways that still resonate. One of the most profound contributions of the Saxons is their influence on the English language. Before their arrival, Britain was largely Celtic-speaking, with Latin holding sway during Roman rule. The Saxons brought their own Germanic dialects, which over time evolved into what we now call Old English. Many of the most common words in modern English, like house, food, and land, trace directly back to the Saxon tongue. Even today, about a quarter of modern English vocabulary has its roots in Old English. The Saxons didn't just give us words. They gave us a linguistic structure. Basic grammar rules, such as sentence order and the use of prefixes and suffixes, owe much to their linguistic heritage. Beyond language, the Saxons also had a profound impact on governance. They introduced systems of local administration that laid the groundwork for England's eventual political structure. The concept of hundreds and tithings, local administrative units used for organizing communities, originated with the Saxons. These systems emphasized communal responsibility and law, concepts that evolved into the foundations of English common law. But their influence didn't stop there. The Saxons brought new agricultural techniques that transformed the British landscape. They introduced the open field system, a method of farming that allowed for more efficient land use and supported larger populations. Their expertise in metalworking and craftsmanship further contributed to the economic and technological growth of early medieval Britain. Socially, the Saxons brought a strong sense of kinship and community. Their societies were built around loyalty to family and tribe, values that would permeate British culture for centuries. This communal mindset also extended to their religious practices. Before their conversion to Christianity, the Saxons worshipped a pantheon of gods and observed seasonal festivals tied to the natural world. Some of these traditions, like the celebration of Yule, were later absorbed into Christian customs and persist in modern holiday practices. The Saxons also played a key role in the creation of settlements. Many of the towns and villages that exist in Britain today were founded during the Saxon era. Their names often reflect their origins, place names ending in tun, farm or settlement, or ham, home, frequently traced back to Saxon roots. These settlements became the backbone of rural England and remain a vital part of its identity. Their cultural legacy isn't just seen in tangible contributions, but also in the way the Saxons are remembered in British identity. In literature, folklore, and historical accounts, the Saxons are often portrayed as hardy, resourceful people, qualities that resonate with Britain's self-image even today. But their influence wasn't always pure or unchallenged. Over time, the blending of Saxon, Norman, and Celtic cultures created a uniquely British identity. While the Saxons laid much of the foundation, their contributions were woven together with those of other groups, creating a rich and complex tapestry. Understanding the cultural and social impact of the Saxons reminds us that history is rarely about isolated events. It's about interactions between people, cultures, and ideas that continue to shape the world we live in today. But what does it mean to say Saxon DNA influences identity? First, let's consider the historical context. The Saxons arrived at a time of great upheaval, replacing Roman rule with their own culture and governance. Over centuries, their influence became deeply embedded in the emerging English identity. Their language, traditions, and societal structures formed the backbone of early England. This wasn't a quick or simple process. It was a blending of Saxon customs with those of the native Celtic populations, resulting in a uniquely British identity. The influence of Saxon DNA on identity becomes even more evident when we examine the concepts of ancestry and heritage. Many modern Britons trace their roots to the Saxons, consciously or unconsciously. Regional pride in areas like East Anglia or Wessex often ties back to Saxon heritage, even if people don't explicitly frame it that way. Names, festivals, and local traditions rooted in Saxon culture persist, creating a link between the past and present. Language, too, is a powerful marker of identity. English, as it's spoken today, carries the legacy of Saxon dialects, while French influences from the Norman conquest added layers of complexity. The foundational structure of English remains Saxon. When Britons use words derived from Old English, they're unknowingly invoking a piece of Saxon history, a subtle but pervasive reminder of their shared ancestry. Cultural symbols also play a role in connecting modern identity to the Saxons. Folklore and literature have immortalized the Saxons as resilient and resourceful people, qualities often celebrated in British narratives. Think of the enduring tales of King Alfred the Great, a Saxon king who defended his realm against Viking invasions and later became a symbol of unity and perseverance. However, the relationship between Saxon heritage and British identity isn't without its complexities. Historically, the idea of Anglo-Saxon purity was misused to promote exclusionary and nationalist ideologies, especially in the 19th and 20th centuries. Today, historians and scientists emphasize the blended nature of Britain's genetic and cultural heritage, countering outdated notions of a singular, pure Saxon identity. Modern DNA research has added nuance to this understanding. Studies show that Saxon DNA is only one thread in the intricate tapestry of British ancestry. Alongside it are the genetic legacies of the Celts, Romans, Vikings, and Normans. This diversity highlights the richness of Britain's history, reminding us that identity isn't static. It evolves through interaction and integration. Personal ancestry testing has also sparked renewed interest in Saxon roots. As people explore their genetic profiles, many discover connections to Saxon migration patterns, fueling curiosity about this chapter of their history. For some, this discovery strengthens a sense of belonging, connecting them to a story much larger than themselves. In the end, Saxon DNA's influence on British identity is about more than genes. It's about the stories those genes tell. It's a reminder that identity is shaped by countless contributions, woven together over centuries. The Saxons may have arrived as migrants, but their legacy lives on in the language, traditions, and very essence of what it means to be British. If Saxon DNA connects the past to the present, archaeology provides the tangible clues that bring this story to life. The land beneath our feet holds countless secrets, and through meticulous excavations, researchers have unearthed incredible evidence of the Saxons' impact on Britain. From burial sites to ancient settlements, archaeology reveals the depth of their cultural, social, and genetic legacy. One of the most iconic discoveries in Saxon archaeology is the Sutton Hoo burial site, located in Suffolk, England. Found in 1939, this burial mound contained a ship grave that belonged to a Saxon elite, possibly a king. The artifacts unearthed here, ornate helmets, intricate jewelry, and ceremonial weapons, showcase the sophistication and craftsmanship of Saxon society. But Sutton Hoo isn't just about the grandeur of the objects. It's about the people who used them. Advances in bioarchaeology have allowed scientists to analyze the skeletal remains from these sites. Through DNA extraction and isotope analysis, they've learned not only about the genetic origins of these individuals, but also about their diet, health, and even their migration patterns. This level of detail paints a vivid picture of life in Saxon Britain. Another remarkable site is the Staffordshire Hoard, the largest collection of Anglo-Saxon gold and silver artifacts ever discovered. Found in 2009, this treasure trove includes hundreds of intricately designed items, from sword pommels to gold crosses. While the hoard itself may not reveal DNA, it provides a glimpse into the Saxons' artistry and their interconnected world of trade, religion, and warfare. Archaeology has also revealed the everyday lives of the Saxons. Excavations of ancient settlements, such as the village of Weststow in Suffolk, offer insight into how they lived. Researchers have uncovered remains of timber-framed houses, tools, and pottery, showing how the Saxons farmed, built their homes, and interacted with their environment. These findings complement what DNA studies tell us, providing context for the genetic markers we trace today. But perhaps the most groundbreaking aspect of modern archaeology is its collaboration with genetics. By combining the physical evidence from burial sites with DNA analysis, scientists can create a more complete narrative. For example, DNA extracted from a burial in Oakington, Cambridgeshire, showed a mix of Saxon and Celtic ancestry, proving that intermarriage between these groups was more common than previously thought. This challenges earlier notions of the Saxons as invaders who replaced the native population and instead highlights a story of integration and adaptation. One fascinating technique archaeologists use is radiocarbon dating. By determining the age of organic materials found at Saxon sites, they can place these artifacts in a precise historical timeline. This helps to correlate the movement of Saxons across Britain with other historical events, such as the decline of Roman rule or the rise of Viking raids. Archaeology doesn't just tell us what happened. It shows us how people lived, loved, and survived. It humanizes the Saxons, transforming them from faceless figures in history books to real individuals whose legacy we can touch and feel today. The combination of archaeological discoveries and genetic analysis has revolutionized our understanding of the Saxons. It bridges the gap between the physical and the biological, offering a story that is as much about the artifacts they left behind as it is about the DNA that still resides in modern Britons. In uncovering these buried treasures, we not only learn about the Saxons' world, but also gain insight into the very foundations of Britain's history. The story of the Saxons is one of migration, settlement, and transformation. But over the centuries, myths and misconceptions about their role in British history have taken root. To truly understand the legacy of Saxon DNA, we need to separate fact from fiction and uncover the realities of their impact. One of the most pervasive myths about the Saxons is the idea of a complete replacement of Britain's native population. For years, early historians portrayed the Saxons as invaders who drove out or wiped out the native Celtic tribes. This narrative framed the Saxons as a dominant force that erased the cultures that came before them. However, modern genetic studies tell a very different story. Rather than replacing the native population, the Saxons integrated with them. DNA evidence from ancient burial sites reveals a blending of genetic lineages, showing that intermarriage between Saxons and Celts was common. This integration created a shared genetic and cultural legacy, rather than a complete divide. Another misconception is the notion of Anglo-Saxon purity. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the term Anglo-Saxon was often used to promote exclusionary ideologies, particularly in the context of nationalism and racial superiority. This misrepresentation ignored the rich diversity of Britain's history, which includes contributions from Celts, Romans, Vikings, Normans, and others. Today, historians and scientists emphasize that the Saxons were just one part of a much larger story. Their DNA, while significant, is woven together with that of many other groups to create the complex genetic tapestry of modern Britain. This blended heritage highlights the interconnectedness of human history, challenging outdated notions of singular or pure ancestry. Another myth is the oversimplified idea of the Saxons as barbaric invaders. Early accounts, particularly those written by Roman or Celtic historians, often depicted the Saxons in a negative light. They were described as ruthless warriors who destroyed Roman Britain and plunged the island into a so-called Dark Age. The reality, however, is far more nuanced. While the Saxons did engage in conflict, they also brought significant cultural contributions. They introduced advanced farming techniques, a rich oral tradition, and governance systems that laid the groundwork for future English law. Archaeological findings, like the treasures of Sutton Hoo, reveal a society that valued art, craftsmanship, and community, dispelling the notion of the Saxons as purely destructive. There's also the myth that the Saxons were a unified group with a single identity. In truth, they were a collection of tribes, each with its own leaders, customs, and goals. Their migration to Britain was not a coordinated invasion, but a series of movements over decades. Even after settling in Britain, they formed multiple kingdoms, such as Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria, that often competed with one another for power. Finally, we must address the myth of the Anglo-Saxon identity as something static and unchanging. History shows that identity is fluid, shaped by interactions with other cultures and peoples. The Saxons themselves were influenced by the native Britons they encountered, adopting elements of Celtic culture into their own. Later, they would blend with the Normans after the conquest, further evolving the identity we associate with Britain today. By debunking these myths, we gain a clearer understanding of the Saxons as a people, not invaders or conquerors in a simplistic sense, but migrants who became part of a larger, evolving story. Their DNA is a testament to this integration, serving as a reminder that history is never black and white. The Anglo-Saxon narrative is one of adaptation, blending, and transformation. By uncovering the truth, we honor not just the Saxons, but all the groups that contributed to the rich heritage of Britain. As we reach the end of this journey through history, one thing becomes clear. The legacy of Saxon DNA is more than just a genetic marker. It's a story of transformation, resilience, and connection. The Saxons arrived in Britain over 1,500 years ago, seeking new opportunities in a land left vulnerable by the decline of Roman rule. Their migration wasn't just about conquest. It was about building a life in a new world. They brought with them their language, traditions, and governance systems, which would lay the foundation for much of modern British culture. But perhaps their greatest legacy lies in the DNA they left behind. Modern science has shown us how deeply the Saxons are woven into the genetic fabric of Britain. From the southern shores of Kent to the eastern plains of East Anglia, their influence remains visible in the people who walk these lands today. This legacy is not isolated. It exists alongside that of the Celts, Romans, Vikings, Normans, and countless others who shaped Britain's history. Together, these groups created the diverse and complex ancestry that defines the nation. Saxon DNA, therefore, is not just a relic of the past. It's a vital piece of the larger story of Britain's identity. What's particularly remarkable is how the study of Saxon DNA has transformed our understanding of history. It's one thing to read about the Saxon migration in textbooks. It's another to see their influence in the genes of modern Britons. DNA bridges the gap between past and present, turning abstract history into something tangible and deeply personal. This story also teaches us an important lesson about identity. The Saxons, like so many others, were migrants. They left their homeland in search of a better life, and through their resilience and adaptation, they became an integral part of Britain's story. Their journey reminds us that identity is never static. It evolves through interaction, integration, and shared experiences. Today, as people explore their ancestry through DNA testing, many are rediscovering their connections to this ancient migration. These discoveries spark curiosity and pride, reminding us of the shared threads that bind us together. The Saxons are no longer just figures in history. They are part of who we are. So, what is the legacy of Saxon DNA? It's a testament to the power of migration and integration. It's a reminder of how much we owe to those who came before us, who shaped the land, the culture, and the people. And it's a story that continues to unfold as science and history come together to deepen our understanding of the past. The story of the Saxons isn't just about them. It's about all of us. It's about how their journey became part of the larger tapestry of Britain's history and how their DNA continues to tell their story, one generation at a time.